none of our committee here. That's, I don't,
Not,
I guess I
not
can
you.
text Bonnie, see.
yes.
Okay.
I think we can, I know I don't want to, it's already late. I don't
We-
need to.
Yeah, I
Hold
don't
this
want
up, but
to
I
keep
can
you
just
guys
ask her.
too late, but yeah. Okay. Oh, here she is.
Oh, well. And I
Oh.
can delete the text that I started to send.
There we
No, the camera.
go.
Okay.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So I'm Melissa Parent. I'm Chief Planner for Conservation Districts, and I've got some of my colleagues on with us, Michael Flowers and Marisol Martinez. They're senior planners here. So they'll be helping us throughout the process. Do y'all have any questions before I start? I've got a slideshow presentation, and hopefully it's gonna be enough information to get us started.
No questions here. I don't know if my
All right.
microphone's on.
Yes,
use
yeah,
Tom
it is.
Yeah, we can hear
I
you.
can hear you. Yep.
See my
Okay,
microphone
so
on.
let me.
It's on.
BT, right there. Oh, that's over here. I need to show
You need to turn that one off.
Okay.
Bonnie and Tom, can y'all hear us?
Yes, I had
Okay.
on my, I was signing in on my phone while he was signing in on his computer. So I'm on his computer and he's gone back to birthday dinner.
Oh, fun.
You can hear me, but
All
we're
right.
good.
Happy birthday.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. So this is just to start off. Oh, is it sharing? Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
So just to start off, this is really a very introductory meeting. We're not quite ready to initiate you guys yet. We are expecting hopefully to officially come back to you potentially January, February timeframe. But we currently have another district in the process that we think may not end up getting their petitions. And if that happens, that would bump you up to maybe potentially start in October, November timeframe of this year instead. So that's why I'm coming to you now, because there's some pre-work that we kind of want to get you in the mindset and get going on some of that public engagement so that you can get ahead of the game, right? This way, when we officially start, we can really get the ball rolling and get you guys going and getting a conservation district, fully established. So this first page, and I haven't done it as a slideshow yet because I wanted to show you this. What we do when we start the process is on our web page, which looks very similar to this, we will give you a little button down here. It's all the way at the bottom of our web page, and this is the page, and you can bookmark that if you want. And we'll give you your own little button for your district. And what that looks like, let me bring that up. Oh, of course. So this is our web page. And like right now we're doing Kids Springs, and we put all of your information up on here. We'll keep a copy of the determination of eligibility so that anyone in the neighborhood can go reference it. Any notification letters that we have to send out to you about meetings. We keep copies of the map so that everyone is very aware of what the boundaries are going to be. And we list all of the meetings. And at every meeting, we will post the slideshow. And we keep audio of the meeting so that if anybody can't come, and we know everybody has lives, you get late work night meetings, you got to get the food on the table for the kids, you got to pick them up after school, sports, whatever. Sometimes you just can't go. But we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be able to participate in any manner that they can. So we always put up the audio and the presentation so that if they can't physically be at the meetings, they can go back and they can listen and follow along and still be able to provide feedback for those types of things. So let's get into some of the meat and potatoes. So I'm going to start off with going over sort of the different types of zoning. So right now, you guys, your base zoning is R75A, which is a residential term, meaning most of your lots are typically around 7,500 square feet. That's the norm. We also have PDs and NSOs, which strictly regulate the development code, which is things like your setbacks, your lot coverage, height of structures, that sort of thing. And then you have conservation and historic. Now, both of us require an architectural component. So that's something that's going to be really important that you guys, when you're talking to your neighbors, that you make them very aware that there is an architectural component required. And that means we're going to be talking about the roof forms and pitches of your house. We might be talking about the window styles of your houses. We might be talking about the style of porch columns and things like that. Because a lot of people, they think that when we start regulating, that all we're really doing is maybe setbacks and like fences. And then you start talking about things on the house, and that's where people start getting a little antsy because they're like, oh, you're going to tell me what kind of windows I can put on your house, on my house? Yeah, in some cases we might want to, depending on what y'all decide you want to regulate and how much you want to regulate that. Now, I will say, in comparison, conservation is much more lenient than historic. With historic, you're really having to go back with those original materials at all times. For us, it's not quite as strict. If you have to replace a window, it doesn't have to go back. If you had an original wood window, it doesn't have to go back as a wood window. We're fine with vinyl windows, right? We're not going to be, that regulated as far as those types of things. And they regulate far more. We also typically, when it comes to the architectural standards, we deal in what is called a wraparound. So typically that's the front facade, and often it's maybe the first 25 feet of the side facades. Sometimes it's a midpoint depending on the district. And those are really where those regulations kind of come in so that it maintains the streetscape. But once you get past that wraparound, oftentimes it opens up. And you can kind of, you're able to do a lot more. So if you wanted to do, a sliding glass door on your back porch, like that would be totally acceptable in a conservation district. Whereas in a historic district, you might have to take that to Landmark Commission and get that approved. And sometimes they wouldn't because it might be inappropriate for the style. So the benefits of conservation. We really are here to try to protect the character of the neighborhood. And your neighborhood is so adorable. I was doing a drive-by this afternoon. Very adorable houses. It's such a cute little neighborhood. And one of the benefits of conservation, and if you go to our website under the forms and guides, there's recently the city of Dallas did an economic impact study in regards to conservation and historic preservation and how beneficial that is to the city. And they basically proved mathematically through all the data sets that conservation and historic districts really, number one, they have better property values and they're more stable, right? Because these are long-term homes. They're typically long-term residents and well-established in the community. And we're really kind of the glue that holds the city together as far as that goes. So the first step in the process is submitting the determination of eligibility, which y'all have already done. And right now we have so many districts wanting to be conservation districts. Right now, the determination of eligibility is kind of holding your spot in the queue. So what we want from you from now until we really initiate and start the formal meetings for which there will be a legal notification that goes out once we're ready to start that. But I'll be alerting you. We'll be having more of these discussions throughout the process before then, is to really talk to your neighbors and really like plant that seed in their head about this is going to be coming. We really want this. This is what our concerns are. And this is really what we're hoping that conservation can accomplish for us. So once we get to the formal initiation, we will hold a couple of pre-application meetings, and it'll be similar to the information that I'm giving y'all here tonight, where we discuss the categories that are going to go on the petition. So the reason I'm coming to you and starting this engagement early is because those meetings, once the final pre-application meeting is done, you, per the code, within, technically it's 14 days, but we need it within 10 because we have to draft the petition language. We need those petition options of your choice to be given to us so that we can draft the petition. And 10 days is a really quick turnaround. We found that it's really difficult and people tend to get a little bit frazzled. So it's really important that they understand that if they're signing the petition, that means that they are in support of creating a conservation district. And once we get 58% of the neighborhood that signs the petitions, we will be moving towards a conservation district. Like at that point, it's not about, well, do we want a conservation district or not? We are. Now it's going to be about what are the regulations that we're trying to institute. And that's where we're really trying to find consensus on. Oops. So as I said, it's either 58% of the land area or 58% of the property owners signing the petitions. You have 12 months to get those signatures. And if you get 75% of the petitions signed by the neighborhood, the zoning change fee is waived. Now, the fee for a conservation district for a district your size is about $2,500. So that's a big give, a big get if you can get that fee waived. That can be a lot for some districts. Otherwise, you'll have to figure out amongst yourselves how you and the neighborhood are going to pay for that. Sometimes it's an HOA that'll take care of it. Sometimes somebody donates funds, have a car wash, whatever y'all need to do.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question here?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, but give me 1 second. Sorry, my son picked a great time to walk in and ask me a question. The last slide said 58% of land area or lots, but this slide says 75% of property owners.
Of property owners or the land. So if you
I just wanted
have,
to see if there was a distinction there or if it's the same criteria for both.
yeah, it is the same criteria. Yeah. So if you have an owner that owns multiple properties, hopefully they are in support because their vote will count, one vote for each of their properties that's within the boundaries, which is kind of how that works. So you guys will have the 12 months to get petitions signed. Once you bring those back to the city and we will verify signatures and all the things that we need to do, we will then start to schedule the post-application meetings. Those post-application meetings are where we really get into the meat and potatoes of the regulations, where we're discussing, the lot coverages, the setbacks, the different architectural styles and what sort of modifications are you wanting to allow? What are you wanting to prevent? And those sorts of things. Once we finish with those, and this is kind of the long scale timeline. So we do pre-application meetings, and then you have all the time for petition gathering. We come back together here, and that's where we work on those regulations. So typically that takes about maybe 5 meetings where we're trying to gauge the temperature in the room. Oftentimes it's about 2 meetings for the development criteria, another 2 meetings for the architectural standards, and then we'll come back for a 5th meeting, basically to make sure that we got everything right. We'll let you know, like, from the feedback that we hear in the room via email, however you guys sent your feedback in, to make sure that we got it right. Then we'll come back to the office and we will draft up a conceptual plan. And that's like an illustrated guide, basically, to indicate all of the regulations that you guys have kind of found consensus on. We'll bring that back to you. And again, you guys will have like a month to review it. And then we'll say, hey, did we get it right? Is there anything that you think we went too far on? Maybe we need to rein it back. Or maybe we didn't go far enough and we need to make something a little bit more stronger. And that's really where we can kind of narrow those things down. Once we get the okay that y'all feel we're in the right spot, we'll come back to our desks again and we'll draft the actual ordinance. We're pretty quick at drafting ordinances. I will say we have to send it to the city attorney's office just for all the legalese and all that stuff, and they take a little bit longer. So once we get into the draft ordinance, sometimes that can take about 3 or 4 months, just because they're so backed up. Once we have a draft ordinance, we'll post that on the page. Again, you guys will have another month to review all that's in the ordinance. And then we'll have a couple more meetings where we say, hey, did we get it right again? Like, make sure we got everything right. Is there anything we need to fix, anything we need to adjust? And if once everything is okay with y'all and we've got consensus that y'all are good with the ordinance, we'll then take it on to CPC, which you will have official notifications again, where you can kind of vote again and say you're in support or you're against this coming. If they approve, then we move on to city council. Same thing, you'll have official notices again. You can vote your opposition or support. And at both of those meetings, you're welcome to come and speak to either of the board or the council, and give your thoughts. You have, I think they give you like 5 minutes to speak, if I'm not mistaken. Typically what happens once city council approves, they'll do like a 30-day moratorium so that everybody can kind of get notified that now there's a conservation district. So now that you're in a conservation district, if you have projects going on in your property, now you're going to have to submit for those projects, just like you would for your permit. We're kind of like the first line. What happens is we'll review the project, and then once we sign off, if something needs a permit, then you can take those plans with our sign off, and then you can go to permitting. And they're usually a lot quicker when they see our stamps and things on it, because they know that we've already done most of the work for them.
Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt again. Can I ask one question on the timeline? Actually,
Yeah.
2 questions, but on the timeline, we have 12 months for petition gathering,
Yes.
but this is a pretty small conservation district. So if we were to say, get all the required signatures in 6 months, would we be able to start this like lower half of the process then?
Yes, absolutely. Whenever you guys get them, I will say that it is better to try to get as many of those petitions signed. And listen, there's always going to be some people that are like, no, I don't, government, get off my lawn, right? There's always going to be those people. You're not going to get everybody to agree to it. But if you can get up to that 75% with that fee waived, that speaks really well to your district much more easily finding consensus when we start to talk about those regulated things, because you're already kind of on the same page, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, if you can get all those petitions signed, or a majority of those petitions signed, and it only takes you 4 months, 6 months, whenever you guys are ready, you can hand those in. And I think we have 30 days, it's either 30 or 60 days to approve them. And then we'll send you guys an official letter that says, hey, you guys are good. We're ready to start those meetings. And then we'll start looking at venues and scheduling for those meetings.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And my other question
Mhm.
is actually just about like if somebody has a project that is ongoing during this process, if it
Mhm.
has already been permitted, and work has begun before
Mhm.
the conservation district is officially approved, and like everything has gotten, all the paperwork has been done.
Mhm.
Is that like grandfathered in, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So anytime that a permit has been pulled, that will be considered automatically conforming to the new district. But if they make any modifications after that, or if they have to come back and open a new permit, then there are things that they might have to go through us and get approved.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are the proposed boundaries. So we've got basically, 4 blocks of South Montreal, 4 blocks of Hollywood, and about a block and a half of Southampton.
Yes.
I did have a question, because there is a church and there is a lodge in your district. Are we going to be kind of are we going to be kind of separating those out and giving them very minimal regulations? Or I'm assuming that's kind of where we're at, instead of trying to regulate, since they're kind of more commercial and recreational facilities.
This is Bonnie Taylor. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. We have not concerned ourselves with the 2 churches. There's one on Hollywood and one
Mhm.
on Hampton.
Mhm.
The only concern I might have is that lodge at the very end of the block at
Mhm.
Hampton, because it could easily be turned into a residence, but I don't know how concerned about it I am. And so there
Okay.
may be others who really want to include, I know the church is the big church wrote, I can't think of the name of it right now. I
Mhm.
want to say Rosemont Christian, but it's not.
It's
Um,
Disciple City.
yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
For all of you who are members. I know he's very much in favor of anything that we do.
Mhm.
The person who's most active there with the neighborhood. The Indian church, I haven't talked to them. Just so happened I was doing some things with the other church, and so we had a conversation about it. But I don't think it's necessary. But others may feel differently. How do you
Mhm.
guys feel?
Typically, for the church, we would call them out as a separate sub area, maybe. And we would probably not have restrictions on that, because churches are given a lot of leeway
Right,
at both the federal, the state level, and we don't really want to mess with that. I mean,
right.
churches, they're their own thing. We don't want to infringe on
No,
their rights and their spaces. The lodge is actually fairly close to some of the residential structures already. So I think that we would be able to include it, and depending on how you regulate there, we may be able to have regulations that aren't going to infringe on either it developing and expanding the space or modifying the space. I think that there are ways to write language that for those 2 properties that we can handle them without being super regulated, and allowing them to still maintain their current functions.
okay, so how do you prevent the sale of that property to someone who wants to build a big residence? Is that in the language that you prepare for them?
So that would depend. There are a couple of ways that we can do that. So oftentimes a lot of the districts, they add demolition to their petition and they have demolition clauses. And another way of doing that is saying that when new construction comes in, it has to be one of these specific styles. So
Okay.
like in your district, it's a majority of Tudor, Craftsman, some ranch,
Right.
and some minimal traditional. If you are, restricting it to those four styles,
Right.
if they do decide to demolish and if they are afforded that right in the ordinance, they would have to come back with one of those styles of structures.
I think that is what I was looking
Yeah.
for.
And oftentimes because of those restrictions, and a developer realizes they're not going to be able to max out the lot or build like a 7-story townhome or apartment complex or something, then they tend to stay away.
Okay. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do have some other questions when you are finished.
Oh, yeah, no, go ahead.
But go ahead and finish your presentation. I was just
Okay.
waiting.
Okay.
Well, I do have a question related to that, if I
Sure.
could ask. So if we know the church is amenable to this or amenable to what the neighborhood wants,
Mhm.
and they do sign the petition as an owner, that counts towards the 50 or 58% of the land area?
Yes.
Okay.
Did I include the church or did I skip around behind it?
So
On my map.
you
They have a
skipped
parking
around
lot at least.
you skipped around the one that's on Hampton, but the one that's
Right.
on Hollywood is included.
So
Yeah.
maybe we should
And-
adjust it to include the one on Hampton.
We can
well,
chat with. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to
what I
interrupt.
would
Yeah.
say about that is so these blocks, these are all commercial structures. Am I correct in that? Right where this section is that was kind of blocked
Everything
across
out?
the
north of
street, across
Brandon.
the street from the church where it goes north of Brandon, those are commercial and they are blocked out. But you could bring it down Hampton to Brandon and then, which would include the
Down to
church.
here.
Yeah.
Oh, up to here. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that would so is this all the church right here?
Yeah,
or
that whole
Yes.
place is the church and everything
Oh,
else
okay.
is homes going south except for the lodge.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. You see why I'm so interested in that land area?
Yeah,
Yeah, it
no,
makes a big
it's
difference.
it's quite a bit. It certainly does. And actually
Good to know.
having it cut here in the alley is actually a little bit easier on our mapping folks because it's a natural boundary of an alley.
Right.
Instead of having it cut kind of behind properties and that sort of thing, it's a little bit unnatural to do that.
So
So
should we cut
if
it?
they're amenable, I would absolutely include them.
Include
Yeah.
them. Okay.
Yeah,
I
and
think that's a good change.
yeah, and we can make specific regulations that state that like the church properties are, maybe they only have a regulation where they're, lot coverage or they have a setback so that they're not, they don't build a tower on top of this person's right next to this person's
Right.
property, right? Because you don't want
Right.
that. But yeah, but we can discuss those types of regulations.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Great. You said that one of the things you mentioned was our gathering the petitions, but those are mailed by the city to the owner of
No.
each piece of property, or what happens?
No. So what happens is y'all will provide the final petition items that you guys want to see because
Right.
and I'll get into this in just another slide or two because some of them are optional.
Okay.
And you don't necessarily need all of them, especially for a district such as yours. Some of them would mean over
Right.
regulation and you don't really need them. So
Right.
so those are kind of the things that y'all will have to discuss. Do we really need this? Can we leave it off?
Okay.
That sort of thing.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we'll have a meeting to
Mhm.
discuss what options we do want to include, and we feed that back to you.
Yes.
And you hope within 12 days, is that what you said?
Yeah, so after that second pre-app meeting, you'll finalize that list and get that to us, and we'll draft the petitions, and then Bonnie will hand them off to you.
Okay.
You'll have to pick them up in person because there's some paperwork you have to sign and all that stuff. And then you go individually because they have to be a wet signature. So if there's anybody that is an owner but is not necessarily local, you may want to try to email or write them a letter or whatever the case is. But we have to have that specific, and the petitions are on blue paper, so you'll know we'll know that it's the original, right? With the wet signature on it.
So I would be there if they are local and they'll allow me to bring it to them. I can do that, or I need to mail it to them.
Potentially, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or overnight it or whatever I'm going to do. I don't know about the USPS if they're going to be around in the next 2 months.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
I know.
But anyway, okay, that was my question. So we will be able to really influence this, making sure that here is the petition instead of just, it came in your mail a week ago and they threw it out,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so
it helps the neighborhood committee gauge who is kind of questioning it, or maybe they're a little bit unsure. Then because you have that 12 months, you can kind of work on them a little bit more, and you'll get to know who really is not in favor of this at all. So you can kind of gauge where the neighborhood is.
Right.
Melissa, if we do that we do that engagement and we realize there's a chunk, let's just say, for example, I live on the south side of Montreal, very far, and we realize, wow, these group of people are kind of hard to get on board. Either they're in a trust or they're rentals. Yeah, they're out of town or they just don't want it. At that point, can we, I don't know, can we gerrymander this map then at that point to cut out, those chunks that we know are not going to have high density of landowners that are going to sign?
So once we do the pre-application meetings, the boundaries are pretty much set. The only time they can be changed is at CPC and eventually city council. So if we get through this process and say like this entire block all of a sudden decides they don't want to be part of it, then we can talk to the city plan commissioner and we can say, hey, we're going to make a recommendation. It would be good for you to make a recommendation at the meeting where we carve out this block and we just change those boundaries slightly. Now, if it's like one house or two houses in the middle of a block, we're not gonna do that, because we want distinct boundaries that are easily visible, right? So we want to use the streets, the alleys, and those existing boundaries that are already in there. Like if there was a river or creek, we would use those natural boundaries that we know probably aren't going to be changing. And we want contiguous boundaries as well. So we wouldn't want to have a straight line and then all of a sudden you dip in and carve out a portion of a block. That does not make for good boundaries or legalese when they're trying to write the legal stuff for this. So they prefer not to do those types of things. But if they're really against it, they can send in those cards for CPC and city council. They can voice their opposition. And that's technically their vote, is when they either don't sign the petition or they vote in opposition at CPC and city council. So really they have 3 chances to kind of voice their opinion and have an official vote that counts.
Melissa, this is Tad Heinberger. I wanted to ask a question because you did bring up the lodge. There's not a real good boundary. I'm sort of foreseeing that possibly not keeping the lodge in could be an advantage, just because it's not residential. It is out on a major corner directly across from Dart Station. It's a concrete block building. Only in future development I can see this affecting. Is it hard right now to take that lodge off of this?
No.
Ted, the reason I don't want to do that is because I want to control future development. I think they can see that we're not trying to control them presently, but with future development, I think that we should work it out so that we have some, protection. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and I was bringing this up for our discussions in the future because even future development, that is a very unusual property. And I didn't know if it would be good to bring it out. I was even later going to ask about our various restrictions, if there can be different types of restrictions on the properties along Wright that are directly across from the DART station, since they tend to try to maybe need more protection from both the station and the roadway.
Protections such as what? Like, are we talking fencing or deeper setbacks or?
Well, possibly even, I can see, I mean, we want from the residential streets, we want to keep the character. But from this Wright Street, which is very much of a thoroughfare and across from a unusual facility, the DART station, I can see people building, let's say, higher to more protect their residents from sound, noise, etc. And so I didn't know
building their home in a higher,
yes,
at a
like
higher,
additions to a home.
Ted, then you take away, Ted, I'm sorry, then you take away the protection of their next door neighbor. So my feeling is that all the way to Wright Street, and then we'll talk about it in our meeting, but we know that we don't want to really control the back half of our houses. We have people who've already extended.
Right.
We do want the facade from the street to look right, and we want the roof lines to be protected. But after that, they can extend their roof up out the back. I think we had a conversation about this. But I don't want to lose the protection for the person next door to them.
Yeah.
That wouldn't, I'm referring to I mean, keeping the look from the street. Like you said, the street, you keep that front story, it looks the same, but I can see the side being able to build off, since you're not the neighbors are all to the residential side. I'm referring to the thoroughfare commercial side.
I don't know.
To build different there.
Yeah, I don't know that they can anyway under the city.
So you're talking about like this, having something for this side of the street?
No, I'm back to look at
so this side.
These houses that are, see, if you look at our boundary, these residences are within our current boundary.
Right.
And if you, let's say, a good example would be right there at Hollywood, further to the west, go down, you have that red brick house right there.
Right.
From the Hollywood side, you can keep the look from the front the same character, but you notice they have a lot of land between the house and Wright Street. If I mean, I do not own this house, it's, you know, something else. If I was trying to add onto this house, I would try to add on to the side to block the noise, the view, and everything from Wright and the DART station.
Well, maybe maybe what we do is I can approach, or you and I can approach those particular homes ourselves and listen to them. They may never have thought about adding on to the side. They may have, one of those houses has turned twice. Nobody, because the guy moved out on one of them. I don't know the one before that, but I don't know that these people are even thinking that way, Tad. I think we ought to just hear what they have to say.
Yes.
And
I'm looking at the idea that both that lodge, everything along there is very different. I just wanted to see, do we have opportunities to write different restrictions in for that type of area?
We can write regulations that say specifically for properties that have a corner side facade on Wright Street. Maybe they're allowed to have 8-foot fences or 9-foot fences, whereas, you know, maybe interior lots are only 6-foot fences, type of thing. So we can adjust those as needed.
Good. Okay. I'll go ahead and let you proceed then. I just wanted to bring that up because I realized that the lodge and that is a very different than the rest of the neighborhood.
I don't know what the square footage of the lodge is. I can probably look at it and see on the COD, but I think that you can build a 1,200 square foot Tudor style home on that piece of property, but I'll have Tommy look at it and we can talk about it in our meeting. And so I'm not inclined to help out the lodge. I don't want to hurt them, but I'm not inclined to worry about who they have to sell to, because a 1,200 square foot home is not very big, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and I think you can probably get it there. But we can look at that more.
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt the lodge.
Yeah.
I love you, Miss Priss. Are you having cake? Sorry, having birthday.
So these are the items that are going to be on the petition that are required to be, these ones are required to be on the petition. So we will have to have conversations in those sort of post-application meetings about these things. So when you're having these discussions with the rest of your neighbors, I want to make it very clear that they have to understand that, we're going to be discussing things like chimneys and porch styles, and this isn't just about how much lot coverage you have, although that is one of the regulations as well. But it's more than just the development criteria, which is what you're currently living under. And that being said, I also have this that I had made for another one where, so you guys are currently in 7.5A. All the ones with an asterisk are the ones that you have to put on the petition, and these are your current regulations. So this can help keep sort of in mind what's current. Does this 25-foot minimum front yard setback work for you? Or maybe your district was developed a little bit different and every single structure is sitting 40 feet back. So maybe you want to alter that front yard setback, right? So this helps you kind of see what you are versus what you want compared to your current regulation. And I went through everything in there. And then anything, obviously this last page, these are the ones, because right now 7.5A doesn't have any architectural regulations. And then these are the optional ones.
One quick question on this for the setback, for example. Right now, the regulation is 25 feet. If we wanted to go the other direction, instead of saying 40 feet, and we wanted to say 20 feet, would we be able to do something less restrictive like that, or can we only be more restrictive?
Nope, you can be less restrictive as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll show in some photos what that might mean later in a few slides coming up here. And then these are the optional ones. So it includes things like your garage locations. If you want impervious surface, basically meaning you don't want anybody to be able to just completely concrete over their front yard or something like that. Things like solar, if you want paint regulated, that sort of stuff. These ones are all optional.
Excuse me, let me jump in. You just mentioned solar.
Mm-hmm.
The House bill, Senate bill from a few years ago that Texas said you cannot regulate solar panels except for certain things. Is that still in effect?
So there is actually a carve out for our type of districts because we do have architectural standards. Typically, when we're talking about solar, it's not about denying anybody solar. We're just restricting maybe where on the house it's located. We have several districts that they're fine if somebody has solar on the backside of their house or on their garage or anything like that, but they just don't want it seen from the street, right? So that they can kind of maintain that consistent historic sort of appearance from the street.
I just wanted to ask because solar is facing sun and houses don't, and I didn't know if that Texas regulation or law affect, if we're excluded from even doing that. I'm really not wanting to go in there at all. I just thought I'd ask when I heard you say solar because I was aware of
and
that.
I mean, you don't have to regulate it at all, but if you don't, that means that anybody can put solar panels on 100% of their roof structure. So just keep that in mind in case that's not necessarily something you want. So we liken our ordinances to a cake, and all of those petition items are your different ingredients. So that's kind of how I want you guys to think of it. They're all sort of interconnected with each other. So your lot coverage is going to tell us how much of the footprint of all of the buildings on a property, how much percentage that can be. And your setbacks are going to kind of give us that sort of buildable area for your main structures and your accessory structures, that sort of stuff. So here's a little bit about how I'm going to show you some things that conservation does well, and then what happens when you're outside of a conservation district. So this is Vickery Place. And as you can see, the development pattern was really consistent, really consistent. All of their front yard setbacks, those porches are almost exact at that 25 feet. And you can tell when you look at the overhead that this is really a neighborhood, and it's finding those patterns and looking at those patterns that are going to help us create those regulations so that they're working for the majority. Now here in Kessler Park, it's not a nice grid like Vickery Place is, right? So when they were creating this district, they had to look at a lot of surveys to find out, okay, well, what is the front yard setback for all of these properties and all of these really strange shaped lots on corners? Sometimes you have to deal with that sort of stuff. And we try to work within that. We may ask for your neighbors at the pre-application meetings to submit surveys so that we can verify, hey, everybody's setback is sitting at 25 feet or 30 feet. Everybody has a consistent rear yard setback, that sort of thing. And we'll take all of those things into consideration when we're talking to you about best practices specifically for your neighborhood. Now, this neighborhood is just general R75 zoning, which is what you're currently living under. So this is something that could happen. You have this guy where his setback is all the way back here, and then you've got this new structure that's all the way up front here, and it doesn't look too hateful from above, but what does it look like at the street level, right? This is a little guy right back here, and then this is that new structure, and he's really far forward. So it really changes the way that the streetscape looks when you're driving down it, right? So these are some of the things that we really want to look for, and hopefully, because when we're talking about the character of the neighborhood and wanting to maintain it, we want to make sure that something like this doesn't happen, because this is an anomaly, right? It's kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. I'm not saying this is bad architecture or anything like that, but for this neighborhood, it's not consistent. And people tend to notice when something sticks out like that right away. And like with M Streets, another thing that I want y'all to be doing before these pre-application meetings start is really looking at the patterns that are in your houses, right? So M Streets is predominantly Tudor cottages and high Tudors, but there's consistency in the architecture, right? Like they've got chimneys within the first 25 feet of the house. They've got window groupings. They've got similar like porch landings and porticos. They all have some form of sort of elaborated entryway, right? There are things about these houses that they're not all exact, but there is still some consistency about them. And that's how you really know, like when you're driving into the neighborhood and you kind of stop and you say, wow, this is a neighborhood. Like this, it feels like home because those things are consistent, and it feels like it's a cohesive neighborhood, as opposed to this that you can tell it's kind of flipping, right? People can sense that. Similar to Belmont Edition, which is very similar to your neighborhood. Lots of craftsmen's, and again, the patterns, they've all got fairly elaborate wide porches. All of the porches have their own separate gables. They've got groupings of windows and things like that. So when you're, walking your dog or you're driving your kids home from school, kind of be paying attention to the patterns that you're seeing in your specific neighborhood. Because especially when we get to starting the discussions about those architectural regulations, those items where you are seeing those patterns, those are probably going to be the most important things that we're going to want to protect and to regulate, because that's what's making the consistency in your architecture and that homey feeling, right? That it's consistent throughout the neighborhood. Because what you don't want is something like this, right? So this is the Lake Cliff Historic District on this side. And then right at the edge of their property line, it ends. And there is a new PD. And you can tell. And I'm guessing that that is not what you want the lodge property to become eventually in the future. So this would be where we could kind of regulate that new construction and say, okay, you can build new construction, you can demolish the lodge, but if you're going to demolish it, it has to be, it has to maintain this certain height, or it has to be a certain architectural style. That doesn't mean that it has to be a residential use. If they still want it to be a lodge, they can still have it be a lodge. We just want to look and make sure that whatever's being built is the look and feel of it is compatible with the rest of the neighborhood, right? You don't want something that is obviously very modern, very contemporary, and sticks out. Development that can happen in the meantime. So this is technically Stevens Park Village, and it started out with this kind of really low-lying sort of missing, what we call the missing middle. These were all apartment complexes. And then they demolished them, and then they built these things along the street. And you can see back here, this is Stevens Park Village. And these are all 1 and 1.5 story houses, very similar to your neighborhood. And this panicked them. And that's why they are currently trying to obtain conservation district, because they know that this is now encroaching on their neighborhood. And if once that first domino sort of falls, it starts happening a lot more in the neighborhood. So they're trying to prevent this from taking over, their neighborhood and all of those adorable little 1 and 1.5 stories, because they don't want to have, like I showed this huge house kind of overwhelming these little ones, right? This is kind of what we're trying to protect the character from. And that's pretty much all I have. Any other questions?
When you said that you had a list of things that we must put into the conservation district, head windows, things like that. And by the way, can we get hold of these slides to look at them again? Or is that going to be available?
Yes, so I'll email you guys the slides, and I'll have our comms person. We have to get these videos because I'm recording this. I'll have her change it to a YouTube link, and I can give you the link. It sometimes takes her a day or two, so I'll probably reach out on Monday and send this all to you by Monday. So yeah, this is the list. So it shows what your current zoning is. All of the ones that have a double asterisk are the ones that must be listed on the petition. And then you have the ones here that don't have any asterisks. Those are not necessarily required. Those are all of the optional ones. And you can discuss amongst yourselves. I will say our current neighborhoods, they've used a lot of different methods to try to engage their neighborhoods. Lakewood, they did block parties and they did a wine walk one night so that the neighborhood committee actually went door to door on their wine walk and were talking to people about the conservation district. They did surveys, they had created their own social media page on Facebook, all different sorts of things to try to gauge number one, what the interest of the neighborhood is in really pursuing this. And if they are going to pursue it, what are their concerns and what are the things that they want to protect? So that's really what these next few months for you guys are gonna be about, is engaging with the neighborhood, engaging what their concerns are and where their interests are as far as conservation goes.
Well, that's why I was asking, because I mean, it did have windows, fences, things like that. In some areas, I can see possibly not trying to be any more restrictive than the current zoning. Like, yeah, you even showed how we currently have a particular front setback that's worked quite well in our neighborhood. Um, though in this particular neighborhood, because we have a lot of buildings dating back into the 1920s, we have a lot of detached garages, which are at a much lesser setback than the current code states. Now, obviously, they're grandfathered in now, but I guess we could put in a smaller setback for future development. Is that correct? For the side
Yes.
setbacks for these garages.
Yeah, and typically when we're doing these ordinances, we do have different setback regulations for accessory structures because those are typically going to be in the rear. Although you do have a few ranches, and I think there are a few front-facing garages, but those are things that we can discuss. But now the things that are, I will say, the things that are required to be on the petition, we can change them if you feel they need to be either more or less regulated, or if you are happy with the current standard, we can just adopt that from the current R75A. So if you guys are perfectly fine with like the 25-foot front yard setback, easy peasy. We have the conversation, the room, consensus in the room agrees, and we move on to the next topic. For something like, say, chimneys, say maybe there's only 25% of the properties in the district that have chimneys, and you say, you know what, Melissa, I know we have to talk about it, but we're not really worried about regulating chimneys. If the consensus in the room agrees that you don't want to regulate chimneys, then we've had that conversation and we don't have to regulate chimneys. We have to have the discussion about it and we have to find the consensus in the room, but it doesn't mean that it necessarily has to be regulated just because it's on the petition.
Oh, that's very helpful to know that.
Yeah. So if there's a lot
that-
of people that are worried about their windows, then maybe that's something we don't regulate. But we at least have to have the conversation and gauge that consensus from the room.
I am aware that in all the existing structures are grandfathered in. We actually do have some of the older buildings that actually have almost effectively a zero side setback on their detached garages. Now, for the existing, they're there. But for future work, is there anything that requires at least some setback? The reason I'm asking, I know that the current codes are often written for fire and safety. So I know we can go smaller, but can you actually go to zero?
You can do a zero lot. Usually on the side yard, they'll allow you to do zero if it's in the rear 30% of the lot. So if your lot is, say, 150 feet deep, that usually means like the rear about 45 feet. Typically, they will still require 3 foot on the rear yard setback just because typically, especially if you have the alleys, those are where a lot of the utility lines run and things like that. And they want that setback that's part of the development code, and we wouldn't want to zero that out. That being said, if you do zero out that sort of setback, anything that is constructed within 3 feet of a side yard lot line does have to be fire rated. And sometimes that is enough of an impediment because the materials are a bit more expensive and it's a little bit more difficult to do a fire rated wall. And it also means you can't have windows and doors on that facade. So sometimes that is an impediment to somebody doing that, and they'll just automatically set it in a little or set it out a little bit further so that they don't have to deal with that. There are also people that like they don't mind being kind of close to their neighbor, but they also don't want to be that close to their neighbor.
That's sort of why I was asking, because I
Mhm.
know that gets to be a problem with neighbors, particularly when you have zero setbacks, where 3 foot is actually so much more workable for a
Yeah.
lot of reasons. Good. That's why I brought that up.
It is, and especially if they're trying to put it at 0 and their neighbor has a fence, like then you have to go ask your neighbor if they can take down your fence so that you can build your garage. Like that tends to really ruffle some
Right.
feathers. So yeah, it's typically easier to have at least a 3-foot setback so that you have a little bit of wiggle room in there. Plus that helps if you have your eaves on the side of your garage, then you're not draining water when it rains
Yep.
into your neighbor's yard either, because that's technically illegal. So we can't have that happening either.
Yes, we have situations like that in the neighborhood from those old early 1920s homes where even
Right.
the roof drainage causes
Mhm.
rot on the adjacent fence and things. So good.
Yeah.
That's why I was bringing it up, so we'd already have it partially discussed for our committee. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have anything. Thank you very much. I think that having those couple of slides, that's what's required of us, and then what we want to look at specifically would help us. So if you're going to pass those on through a YouTube or whatever, I can access those. Or if you don't mind sending me those couple of slides, then I can
Yeah.
print them for everybody and they can begin to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And have fun with your public engagement.
Yeah,
You
you've
know,
given us a lot of ideas.
it's a little bit of a slog. I will say sometimes it takes a little bit of time for people to kind of warm up to it. There's a lot of people that'll be like, oh, like why are we changing this? And it might ruffle a few feathers, but the more you kind of work them and explain what your concerns are and what you're really hoping to protect, I feel like it tends to get people more on board. And if they're worried about like their property values or anything like that, please, point them to the economic impact survey that we did, because it shows that conservation and historic districts we do nothing but raise, elevate the value for the city. And it's very stabilizing as far as property values and your property taxes go.
Did you say that's on your website, that economic impact study, or it was the City of Dallas?
Yes, let me share that. So back on our webpage, if you go to this forms and guides one down here in the middle and just click that arrow, it's right here. And you can just click that and it opens up this, and then you just have to click the link. And it's a pretty long study. It's I think it's like 50 some odd pages, but it goes through all the demographics. It goes through the different kind of property values and all the economic value, everything. It covers both conservation and historic combined. And you can see all the different, whether it's single family, whether it's multifamily, whether it's commercial, all that sort of stuff. And I think people were really kind of waiting on this for a lot of districts, because a lot of people are worried that once you bring in conservation, that their taxes are going to just go through the roof. And while conservation does raise it a little bit, it stabilizes it in the long term. Because you're not going to have, when DCAD comes and reevaluates your house because you put an addition on it, they don't assess it the same way when it's conservation and historic as they do when it's typical zoning. So it really does stabilize those tax rates. Which is a big thing for people, because nobody wants their property taxes to keep going up, right? Yeah.
Yes. Melissa, I would like to ask a question. I did look at a house in Kessler, and this is on the DCAD, and I noticed they did have this is for the land value, and then they had conservation district. So it was split into 2 sections. Can you explain that as to how that works? Because it's not clear whether it was an additional assessment on the land or if it was, well, whether it costs more or costs less, because that could be a concern by some people.
I know that like sometimes they'll put that it's in a conservation district, but that shouldn't have equal to a change in the value. Um, do you do you happen to remember the property address?
I could go get hold of that. I remember it had on the land value, it had a, let's just say land and an assessment, and then it had conservation district, and it had like a 50% note next to it and another value. I guess I could, if your email's around, I can go back and find that because you see, I've actually been
Yeah.
trying to do some research here.
Because usually when we see something like that, it typically means that there were two owners, or sometimes it's a commercial property and the
Hmm.
commercial entity will be the first listing, and then the actual owner might be the second entity.
This was residential single owner. Mhm.
Okay, yeah, I'd have to look at that because that's not typical from what we see in DCAD.
How do we communicate? How could I communicate to you when I go back and find that? Because this was, God, we've been doing this for a few years now. I remember looking at this over a year ago.
Yeah, if you want to
Yeah.
email me, it should be on that. My email should be available on the calendar invite, or Bonnie has a copy of it.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
You got the email. You can just respond to her on
All right.
there,
Yeah.
just reply to her instead of the group.
Good. I'll find that and send it to you so you can take a look at it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I want to look at it again too. I'm a little unsure. You tell on my memory, I couldn't remember exactly how it states, but I remember it really caught my attention seeing two different land values on the appraisal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not typical from at least not what I've seen in DCAD.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd be interested to see that and seeing if any of the other neighbors are the same way.
Yeah. Good. I'll get with you later. Thank you.
Sure. And throughout this process, if y'all want to schedule more meetings like this just to talk about where you are, what kind of questions you should be talking to the neighborhood about, or if any of the neighbors have very specific questions, they can always contact us. We're happy to email, via phone, whatever. They can always get a hold of us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any last questions?
I'm just checking to see who's here and who's not. So we had about half the people not here. So that happens,
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's kind of typical for the meetings. For a district of your size, I would probably wager that we might get maybe 30 to 40 people in attendance at most of the meetings, which is why we record them and why we post them online, because it's really important that even if they can't be physically present in the meetings, that they still have some way to be able to engage with the process. Because what we really don't
Right.
want is to get to the end of the process and you have a bunch of people saying, well, I wasn't a part of this and I didn't agree to all of these things that the room decided, and now there's contention and it starts forming factions in the neighborhood. And then when we try to get to CPC, there are people that don't agree, and then you end up getting a lot of opposition. So getting the word out now is really going to be to your benefit. Having these conversations with folks is really going to be to your benefit towards the end of the process. The more engaged they are with the process, the easier it goes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
One
time.
of your forms on your site is the Conservation District submittal requirements, and it was last updated in 2023. And of course, it's like a checklist item. And I do notice it even says things like, oh, here are new construction conservation districts, and it lists just maybe a few of them. And then it said, well, forgotten in districts 12 and 15, not required for number 9, which is M streets. Is this something that's updated later, and we would be put onto that, or explain how that works for future development?
So this is an older form. We've actually gone to a completely electronic process now, which is called Dallas Now. So when you have to make repairs on your house and you've got to submit an application to us, this is kind of what the landing page will look like. And depending on the district, some of those districts are specifically called out because like Vickery Place, Belmont, and the M Streets are in flood zones. So they have very specific requirements for the foundations on their homes to deal with that. So that's why those specific ones are called out. If you have similar issues in your neighborhood, then yes, we would absolutely, add that for you guys if that was a need for the neighborhood. I don't necessarily think it is. And I was
that
actually looking,
explains a lot.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that, 'cause
I was
it's
looking through your
grading, things like that.
neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was very specific for some additional concerns, especially in dealing with new construction, because most new construction, a lot of those older houses, and I'm sure a lot of your current houses are probably pier and beam foundations. But most new construction that comes in, developers are going to put it on a slab. They're not going to want to do pier and beam foundation. And when you have those flood zones, that can make a big difference into how often you have to
We're not in
repair.
flood zone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay,
right.
so next thing for us is to have a meeting among ourselves and begin to talk about some of the things that we need to decide, but also to make some plans for having some wine walks or donuts and orange juice block by block and give the people a
Absolutely.
chance to talk to us. Okay, that sounds great. Well, we're eager to start because we were told we're up in line for January of 25. And when we were told in 24, halfway through 24, that we weren't going to be till 27, it really was upsetting because we had so many people working hard to get it started. So I'm glad that you contacted us, and I'm glad to hear we can get a head start on being prepared.
Yeah. I think when Forward Dallas started to go through, I think it really kind of worried a lot of people because they're really trying to bring in that economic development into the city. But the question is, where is it going to go? And is it going to run over anybody? So I'm really excited to be getting you guys started. Tentatively, we are still looking at maybe January, but if that other neighborhood kind of falters, we may be able to bump you up earlier to October. So
we want to be ready.
I will definitely be keeping in touch. And if you have any gauge of the sentiment in between here, if you've got a lot of people on board, then maybe we can discuss talking. We try not to run too many conservation districts in tandem because that's a lot of evening meetings for us to hold, because we're a very small staff here for conservation. We've only got so much manpower, but we're going to try to move you up as quickly as we can to get this completed for you.
Good.
So
that's great to hear. Thank you.
Yep. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me.
Okay, thanks everyone for being here too.
All right, stop the recording. All right, and I will